Okay. So today I wanted to do a little run through of sync on our network. Um, and so this is a new concept to V3, and so this is something to be aware of. Um, the best way to start out describing this is to show at a high level what's going on inside of our network. And then kind of should I work up? That's the question. Let's work up because then you can kind of see how it gets up there. So we have three different syncing functions. Well, I guess technically four, but I'm not going to dive into history sync right now because that uses a completely different syncing system. So we have three different syncing functions that you might come across. We have group.sync, or actually we probably call this conversation.sync just because it's a group or a DM. So this is conversation, singular, dot sync. Then we have conversations, plural, plural dot sync. And then we have conversations, which is also plural, um, dot sync all. And so these are the three different types of syncs that you can call. And I'll dive into each one of them individually. So the first one is conversation.sync. So this means you have one individual conversation and you want to fetch all of the new messages or group or whatever conversation updates. Um, and this one is if you want to see if you have any new conversations that came in. So the reason that there are two separate syncs here is that at the network level, we have at the kind of at the MLS and network level, we have two different databases. One of them stores welcome topics, and the other one stores group topics. And a group topic is essentially a conversation topic, but you might see it'll be like G dash, and then it'll be like the ID, some random characters. And this one will be W dash, and it'll be your installation ID. So that's how you can kind of identify a message that is a welcome or a message that is a group. And they're stored in two separate databases. So whenever you're calling conversation.sync, you are saying, go to this database and find all of the things that have this conversation ID, um, and anything that's new there. So the interesting thing about sync is that there's a cursor. So inside of this database, there's like, message, 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 commit, message. And a commit is like, I updated the name of the group. A message is like, hi, good morning. Um, and you have all these messages, and you call sync for the first time, and it pulls down all these messages. There is a cursor. I don't have cursor, we'll call it C. And the cursor on your first sync is right here. After you call sync, the cursor is here. So the cursor doesn't change until you call sync again. So now you get a couple more messages and you want to get those messages. So you call sync. And when you call sync, it takes this cursor and it says, give me everything. And it moves the cursor again. So the cursor only moves when you call sync. It doesn't move whenever you're streaming messages. So these messages may already exist in your database, but you are going to still fetch them when you call sync. And the reason this is important is that we can't guarantee ordering of messages through a stream. So if I send good morning and then you send hey, and then for some reason the stream streamed good morning before it streamed hey, when you call sync, it will put hey and good morning in the correct order, because the sync actually will put the order correctly. So that's the reason why the cursor doesn't move, because we can't, streams aren't entirely reliable in that sense. Um, in case like a message got missed or you weren't streaming during a period of time. So that's the cursor based for a group. And then for conversations.sync, it's the same exact thing, but it's for welcomes. So you got, a couple of new conversations and you have the cursor and you move it down here, and now the cursor's here, and repeat the process for any new welcome. The reason that this is important is that the cursor never goes back up to the top. This cursor just keeps moving down, which means you will never refetch messages that you've already fetched. Um, so it makes the request smaller, right? Because you're getting less data, but it also means that if you log into you're never going back. You're never getting these messages again. These messages will never be refetched from the network um, after this point. And it's all installation based, and that's a whole nother conversation. I can dig into that in a different talk. So that's the two syncing methods, and that's how they work. So then you're like, okay, well, what is conversation sync all? And why is that important? And why should I call that instead? So this is where the meat and potatoes are. So um, so we have two databases, a welcome database and a group database. And when you call conversation sync all, you want to sync everything. You want to sync all your welcomes and you want to sync all your groups. However, there are also 3 different types of groups. So when I'm talking about the group table over here, put this in a circle, there are 3 different types. There's a group, a group, a DM group, and a sync group. And like I said, this will probably come up later. How many times can we use the word sync to mean different things? A sync group is actually how we do history syncing. It is the mechanism that allows you to sync between 2 different installations. So if you think about the network up here being things that everyone cares about, like these are things that I send a message and it goes to not just myself, it's everybody. When you think about things that come through a sync group, it's things that only I care about, my installation. So syncing groups is like a sync group handles, I blocked a person on installation A, and I want it to also be blocked on installation B. How do I get information from installation A to installation B? And I don't want to put it up on the network because the network doesn't care. The only person who cares about this blocked user is me. And so that information goes through a sync group. And like I said, going to be a deep dive with history sync, and there is a lot more to go in here, but I'm just giving this transparency that it only gets synced when you call conversations sync all. So if you're trying to sync your consent with multiple different installations, you want to be calling sync all so that those things are syncing inside of your own installations. And it's not just consent, it's HMAC keys, it's messages, etc. Conversation sync all is how you handle history syncing. Again, another talk. So conversation sync all, the way that it works is first and foremost, it calls sync welcomes. So it'll sync all your welcomes. Then it says, so first and foremost, sync all my welcomes. Now sync all of my groups. All of them. I want everything. And so that means it'll iterate over every single one of your groups that you have, one by one. Actually, not, I mean, it is kind of one by one. It's like batched. It's in the join all, it's a little bit more performant than one by one. And it'll sync all of your groups. So this sync all makes sure that everything that you could possibly get from the network, every single cursor has been moved, and everything you could possibly get from another installation has been fetched. So it's kind of slow. Like, like it's really important, but it's kind of slow. Like it's going to take a couple of seconds. It should definitely be done in a background job. The additional pieces here that, you might not want to sync everything. Like you probably don't want to sync your spam. Maybe you don't even want to sync your requests. So this takes, on the network level, it takes an array of consent. So you can say, I just want to sync allowed groups. And in that scenario, it would call sync all welcomes, and then it would say sync all groups that are marked as allowed. And that would like substantially, limit And that's because when you think of what you really want here, like why is syncing important, especially in a sync all scenario? You're like, well, if you're building an inbox and you have a list of conversations here, you want this list to be ordered by the last message that was sent. But you don't know the last message unless you go to the network to see where when the last message was sent. There could be a conversation way down here at the bottom, row 50, that hasn't had a message in it for like 10 weeks. But the person in there was like, I'll reach out to you in 10 weeks. And then they just sent you a message. And now this one needs to go to the top, um, because it's the one that has the latest message in it. And so that's the importance of this. And we have some, performance improvements in here that get the last message fetched performantly in this list. And again, I can go into that on the list conversations view. But yeah, that's the importance of sync all. There are so many words that we use that mean the same things. And when I think about the three words that are misused the most in our or used the most in our protocol for things that are mean completely different things are
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
group, message, and sync.
And sync.
If I had to think of the three words that we use a ton in our protocol that are used to describe wildly different things, everything is a group. Like that's just like this is just an MLS thing. Everything is a group, and I kind of like dove into like that here.
Yeah.
Everything is a message, and that's the way that our nodes work. So like it's a welcome message, it's a message, it's a commit
Application
message.
message or yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's a message, not just like what you think of as a message, which is like I messaged you. And I'm like,
Right.
no, everything is a group is a message. Um,
Oh,
and
one
then
question that did come up
yeah,
was around calling sync all is like, do we have a recommendation about how often to call it?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it should always be done in a background job just because we know it's gonna be a little bit more
Yeah.
expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I would call it more frequently than not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that that being said, like it's in theory not supposed to be very costly because it's only fetching new things from the last cursor if there are new things.
Yeah.
So if you call sync all for a group that hasn't had any new messages, the cursor won't move and nothing will be downloaded from the network because there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to download. That being said, it does make a request out to see if there's anything. And so
Mm-hmm.
it will make all of these requests. So even if there's nothing to fetch, it still takes time because it looks to see if there's anything to fetch.
Right.
Um,
Right.
we're working on ways to make this smaller. One, because we don't want people to get rate limited if they're, have 5,000 groups that they're trying to sync. Um, so that's where we have this consent in here. We're probably going to add pagination. That's like an upcoming thing. I mean, we'll handle that to make it more performant. And then we're also looking at ways to say like just sync groups that actually have updates. If there's a way that we can get the the topics from the network for things that actually got messages in this time period.
Yeah.
Um, and then try to do some sort of intelligent sync that only syncs new ones. But all of those additions are all of those improvements are protocol driven, which means
Mhm.
that from the integrator perspective, all it will appear is that it's getting better in terms of performance.
I have another question, which is like the temptation would be, and again, I'm not an engineer, but the temptation would be to call conversations sync all on a regular basis, run it in the background. When would I want to individually call like conversation sync and conversations sync instead?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that conversations sync is less valuable with sync all. Um, that is being said, if all you really care about is new conversations that have come on the network, then maybe that's okay. The difference here is like If all you care about is new conversations that have come on the network and you don't care about the ordering of them, then you would call sync. If you care about the ordering of them, you have to call sync all because you also have to sync the messages inside the group to get what actually happened. So syncing welcomes just gives you the welcome for the group, which doesn't give you any information about what happened inside the group. Um, and so the only reason you would ever call conversations.sync is if you really were building some sort of flow where you didn't care about the ordering of the conversations and you just cared about making sure that all of the conversations existed. I could see maybe a scenario with a bot who's like, oh, I'm not displaying this to the user. All I really care about is that all the conversations exist. And then I'm going to sync only the ones that I want to interact with individually. And so like you would call conversations.sync just to make sure you have all your existing conversations. And then you would call conversation sync on a specific conversation if you cared about that one in particular and the messages in that one in particular. So I could see conversation.sync being used on a conversation list screen, like you're here and you click on this one, and it pops you into like a screen that's like, here's the group and here are all the messages. I could see maybe like if you pull to refresh, like if you swipe down and there's a little spinner, like that would call conversation.sync because
Oh,
you're
right,
really
right.
only looking to refresh this one screen. And the only reason that would be a scenario is like, I don't trust that the stream is working, or I thought I should see something and a user wants to refetch to see like if they've missed something.
Ah.
Um, but if you're in the screen, streaming should probably be catching all your messages, but that would be a scenario where you would call sync.